Greetings, this is Jim Lindsay. This is a tutorial on Microsoft Publisher's newsletter template. So I'm going to show you how to create a newsletter primarily from reaching out to Microsoft Word through Microsoft Publisher. Because of the XML format in which Microsoft Office stores its data, you can, in the center of a Microsoft Publisher page, you can essentially create a hole and reach over to the other application and pull data into Microsoft Publisher, which is really cool. And you can do the opposite as well. You can go, from Excel to Microsoft Word, or from PowerPoint. You can reach to Excel and pull stuff into it. So this XML data storage format has made porting data from one application to another really simple, and it's pretty neat. So that's what we're going to be working on in this tutorial. It shouldn't take too long. What you do with it is you should take this data and then turn around and start to create your own desktop publisher own newsletters, and that will take some time. The actual creation of an entire newsletter, as opposed to what I'm going to show you, which is just the simple steps of how to do some things. But this part of it itself shouldn't take too terribly long. So let me show you the instructions that we're going to use, as well as the support files. Okay, this is an assignment, and as you would read through this, basically what you'd learn is that you were recently hired as the editor of a newsletter, and the name of this newsletter is called the Duluth Writing Club. This is in Duluth, Minnesota. And the assignment here is to create the January issue of this newsletter. It's a 4-page document. You can see that from the information right here. You have a staff of writers which has created the documents for you. You don't have to go out and write all this stuff. That's going to be provided to you. Your job is simply to decide which articles are going to fit into the newsletter, which ones are going to look the best, which ones best reflect whatever you're trying to communicate, in that particular edition of the newsletter. So that's your job as the editor. Now, of course, you have to look at the articles and make sure that they, if you're a real life editor, you'd also want to make sure that the articles were well written and all that sort of stuff. But in this case, we're just laying stuff out in this assignment. So that's what you have to do. This last point here, be careful to not include too much. That's really hard for my students to get. It's very common for them to want to include every single possible thing that I give them, when I usually give you too much stuff on purpose, because I want you to put on that editor's hat and start to think about things with a critical eye and say, this fits well and this doesn't fit well. You want to create a document that looks nice and has a consistent, uniform look throughout. And we've been talking about that, with all of the design stuff that we've been talking about from the Non-Designer's Design Book textbook. And so, you want that repetitiveness, you want that consistency throughout your entire document. So, in order to make every single thing that I give you fit, you'd probably have to make everything have a very, very small font, or have some pages with a big font and some pages with a little font, and that would look ugly. And so that, in a way, I'm trying to force you to make choices and decide which parts of these things are actually going to fit well in your document and which ones won't. So that's the scenario here. This is information about the document itself. This will come into play especially when we start to work with what's called the masthead. And the masthead of a document is essentially at the top of the front page. Think about newspapers or magazines that you like to read, and think they have think of Rolling Stone magazine, for example. Rolling Stone has that very well-known look. Like when you look at the top of the front page of the Rolling Stone, it has the font and everything else that goes into the Rolling Stone part. People recognize that. A lot of people could point that out, whether they read the magazine or not on a regular basis. It's well enough known that you're like, oh, that's the Rolling Stone, or Time Magazine, or maybe U.S. News and World Report, something like that, that has a really well-known look. That part of the document is the masthead. So this will come into play when we start working with the masthead. This volume and issue information, this is something you may not be familiar with. In a periodical, the volume refers to the year of publication, and the issue refers to which issue that year it is. And so in this case, because it's January, this is the 17th year of publication of the Duluth Writing Club's blotter newsletter, and it's the first one. It's the January issue. So that's what volume and issue mean. And when you work with the newsletter template, you're going to see places to place that information. As we move down the case here, you'll see there's like information about people that are part of the club. This would come into play, like as you'll see with the requirements here. You would want to write announcements pertaining to the club and the club's activities, and you have to make that stuff up. So having some information about who's in the club, who founded the club, how old is the club, that sort of stuff might help you make up some of the announcement sort of information. So that's provided just simply as fodder to help you come up with stuff from your imagination. Okay, so let's get to the requirements themselves. And essentially what you have to do, you have to use the Microsoft Publisher Newsletter template and then save that file as your name flyer.pub. Once that's done, you then modify the masthead with the appropriate information about that edition. Then you're going to download and use the articles that I will provide you to make your newsletter. So let's work on these three things first. These three things will be a good place for us to begin our work. So I'm going to just minimize the instructions, and I'm going to start Microsoft Publisher. And you would do that, however your computer is set up. I have a little shortcut down here on my task pane here to get that fired up. And the newsletter is a built-in template. So I'm going to go to built-in, scroll on down here to the letter N. See, these are in alphabetical order. I'm going to go with newsletters. And then there are lots of different installed templates for newsletters. I'm going to go with the banded example here. I'll select banded. And then from that, I could then start to make choices about color schemes and font schemes and so on. And you're familiar with that from previous assignments in the color schemes and the font schemes. As far as the business set goes, I'll just let that be. You'll also recall that from an earlier lesson where we created that WKU business set. This page size, I'm gonna keep the 2-page spread. If you use a little drop-down box, you can go either 1-page or 2-page spread. I'm gonna keep the 2-page spread. And as far as include a customer address or not include a customer address, I'm going to not check that box. But what that does for you, if you check it, is it leaves space on part of the publication so you could fold this thing up and send it through send it through the U.S. Postal Service to your customers. And so if you're creating a document which you then physically mail out to your readers, that's a pretty helpful little thing to include. And then what you can do in your word processor application, you would print out mailing labels and then affix those to the part of the newsletter that's already prepared for a customer address. So I'm going to leave that unchecked because I don't want that in my newsletter. And with all of this selected, I'm going to hit create, and it reaches out to the repository of templates, and it makes my banded newsletter template for me. You'll see that there, as I look at the pages part, there are pages 1, 2, 3, and 4 here. And if I wanted to add more pages to this, I can simply, if I just come over here, I can right click in here and I can insert pages. Let's say I wanted to insert just, and by the way, you can choose the layout. Like let's say there's an order form page. This one over here, let's do like a response form on this one. There are different choices, about what else you can do. Do you want to do it after the right page, and so on. So you make your choices here, and it put those in place for me. And because I went to the other box, I basically lost those layout things I wanted. But here are those pages that I just inserted. If I wanted to get rid of these, let's say I just wanted to have like I've gone from a 4-page newsletter to a 6-page newsletter. If I wanted to get rid of these things, of course I could hit undo because I just added those. But let's say I didn't. Let's say it was 3 hours from now and I've done a bunch of other things. What you do is you right click in here and you can come to the delete option, and you can delete either just the left page, just the right page, or both pages. And I'll delete both pages there, and to get it back down to what the template provides with 4 pages. And so that's how you can start to manipulate how many pages are present in your publication. And there are other ways that you could do this, through the insert dialog box. There's usually about 2 or 3 ways to do just about everything in an Office product. I'm just showing you one. But to get into the number of pages and what have you, I find the easiest way is just to right click over in here and then work with what you're seeing right there. So we have our pages selected, and if we were to zoom in here, and we'll do that in just a minute, you'll see that essentially what we're looking at is we have several placeholders here. So like there's an inside story headline. We have what's called a pull quote over here. We have images in place. We have some captions in place next to the pictures. Those are important. We have headlines and so on. And these are places that exist. I'm going to go back to the full page view there. What that does for you, it gives you places to start to put your newsletter together. And these are pretty. These templates generally look nice. And you can just kind of start with this and then put together the newsletter that you want to make. And so this is my template. I've chosen it from the collection. Now what I need to do is save this. I'm going to go to my file tab of the ribbon, get into the backspace here, just go to save as. I'll put this on my desktop. I'm going to call this Jim Lindsay newsletter. And it's going to be a publisher file.pub. Hit save. And so now I have my Jim Lindsay newsletter.pub, has the 4 pages, and I can then start to work with things like the masthead and the stories. And so let me first work with the masthead. I'm going to select the title up here, and I'm going to hit the F9 key. And well, no, I'm not. That with my recording software, with it actually pauses it. So I'll just zoom in with the plus sign and the negative sign here. This top of the page, as you can see, and I'll make this page pane, I'll make this shrink up so it's not taking up so much of our screen real estate. So this is the masthead up here, and each one of these little boxes, as you recall from working with the flyer publication, these are just objects. These are text boxes, and all you have to do to modify that is just type in there what you want it to be. And so I believe this is called the Duluth, forgotten the name. It's called the Blotter, B-L-O-T-T-E-R. So I'm going to call this the Blotter. So that's the name of my publication. You'll see there's room for the volume and issue, and I can get in here and I can make that volume. Actually, I'll have to volume 17, issue 1. And there we go. And you probably can't see that super well. So I've got my title in there. I have my volume and issue information in there. As far as over here, newsletter date, I could then go in here, and this is for January, so I'll put January 2017. And so that's how I start to work with the masthead. Now, if I wanted to customize that, I could, but at a minimum, I'm looking for that kind of information where you have like the date of the publication, the volume and the issue number, the title as well. Okay, now and again, because I had the WKU business set as my information set up here in the name of the organization, it put Western Kentucky University. up there I would need to put like the Duluth writing, well, writing club, and I might put a logo or something up there, a picture that would indicate to my readers that, hey, that's what this is for. So that's the masthead. Now let's get down here to the stories, and I'm going to work with at the bottom of page 1. Again, if I showed you the whole page there, I'm going to work with the second story here because I want to show you several different things. Oh, let me do a couple other things while I'm at it. Just come over here to, I'm going to select this table of contents and I'll zoom back in there. And the table of contents is also called the inside the issue object. And so again, everything on this page is called an object or referred to as an object. And what this is a table. And if I were to pull this out to the side here, you'll see this is just a text table that's been placed there. I don't like these things. When you guys, for your assignments, I really hate these table of contents because they're usually 2 or 4 pages long. And if somebody can't find something in 2 or 4 pages, then that's kind of silly. And so the need for a table of contents here is very, very small. So I want you to get rid of these things. So like the way you get rid of anything, you just select an object, I right-clicked it, and I'm going to delete that object. And so I'm going to get rid of that. These special points of interest, if you wanted to use those, you could. If you're not going to use something, like I'm not going to use this on the front page, I'm going to right-click and delete that object. And so I'm going to try and clean up my front page as much as I can. So there we go. It's looking a little bit better. And I want to work with this story here at the bottom. And so I'll select this story, zoom on in here, and this is where I want to start to put my data from Microsoft Word into this space right here. Now, I could do this several different ways. One, I could just type it, but that's not, please don't do that. This is not a word processor. This is this program is simply made for the layout of documents, and then you create the text and stuff like that in a word processor. That's a much better tool, and then you pull it into this tool. So I recommend that you don't try and type stuff, but you could just straight up type it. Also, what you could do, the story that I want for this actually is in a folder on my desktop, and let me show you where those stories are stored right now. I've got a folder here called Duluth, and inside of this folder I have 6 different stories, and I'll go with like this story 16 here. Story 16 is a story from golf. This is for actually from Caddyshack. If you've ever seen the Caddyshack movie, Ty Webb was Chevy Chase's character, and I wrote this story a few years ago when I was trying to come up with like a collection of stories that were kind of Caddyshack themed. And so this is like Chevy Chase's character Ty Webb was like the golf pro at the country club. And so as you read through this story, it's talking about how would you if you were a golfer, how would you recover from an injury to your Achilles heel if you're trying to golf. And so that's what this is about. Now it's has a suggested title here, it has the author, it has the article itself. So this is what I want in the newsletter as a story. Now I could just copy and then paste this over in the newsletter, but I'm not going to do that either. What I would recommend to you is I'm going to have this thing closed, story 16. It's in that folder. In Publisher, I'm going to select this story, and I'm just going to right-click it. I'm going to right-click it, and one of my choices is to change the text. So I'm going to change text. I'm going to come down here to text file. And then it's going to let me browse out to somewhere on my computer, and I have all those stories stored in Duluth, this folder called Duluth. There's story 16. I'm going to select it, and I'm going to hit OK. What it's going to do, it's going to reach out there and get that story for me, and the story is a rather long story compared to that text box in which I tried to put it just a moment ago. And so I get this prompt right here saying like, hey, auto flow to this box right here. And then what it's done, it's gone to page 2 of of the publication. And what I'm going to do, I'm going to hit cancel. I'm going to hit cancel here. Now, if I wanted to auto flow to this box, I would hit yes. And what that would do would take the remainder of the story and put it into this box. But I would like to have more control over exactly where this goes, when I want to do it. So I'm going to just completely cancel out of this whole auto flow choice here. I'm just going to hit cancel. And so as I come to the bottom of the screen here, you'll now see that that story is in the box. It includes the title. And so what I would do, and one reason I chose this story here, when my students start to work with these stories I provide them, a lot of the times they'll actually include the possible title in the article, and that's not correct. And so I need to get this possible title out of the story. So I'm going to get that out of there, and I'm going to, and there's basically the author of it, and so there, that looks a little bit better up here. What I could do, I could then put the title perhaps, and that's going to start to look a little bit better. So now what I have is, get this where I can see the whole page. I now have that a good title. We're talking about the dreaded slice, and as I look at that story, I get to see part of it. Now it stops here. Now how do I know that story stops? When I selected this part of when I click on this end of the story over here, you'll see the dot, the ellipse button right there, that dot. And what that tells you, anytime you're in Microsoft Publisher here, if you have a text box and you select it and you see this dot, what that's telling you is that there's more stuff in this box than will actually display. So I have like 10 pounds of stuff in this 5-pound bag here. And so what that tells me is I need to get that stuff somewhere else. And so how do you do that? Well, let me show you. I'm going to put, what I'd like to do is take this from the first page to continue this story over to basically the third page. And on the third page, I'd like to put it right about there, in the middle of the third page. Now, I'd like for you to think about magazines that you like to read. And I'm sure you've read magazines or read newspaper stories where they continue from, part of the magazine or the newspaper to somewhere else in the document, right? And a lot of the times, if it's like a cover story, they'll actually lead you through multiple pages within the document. They'll actually take you through, if it's a long story, they may take you to like 3 or 4 places within the magazine to read that story. And they do that on purpose, because what they place around that story is advertisements. And the way that the magazine makes money is through selling advertising space, right? On top of selling the magazine itself. And so they'll say, hey, advertiser, we know that you really want to get as many eyes as possible on your advertisement. So we're going to have this lead story, this head story is going to be about Lance Armstrong, and he's going to give some sort of interview about the Tour de France and doping and stuff like that, and his take on it, and now that he's been busted and blah blah blah. And so that's going to be a really provocative article, so we know a lot of people are going to read that. So we think we can get like a lot of advertising dollars for advertisements placed around that, a lot more than an article about Jim Lindsay, who's a teacher at WKU. So that's based on the fact that they've got these advertisements. They want to get people to look at that. You can guide the person through the document, through the magazine, through the newspaper, by basically continuing and telling people where to continue reading. And so that's what we want to do here. We want to take them from the front page to this page over here. So let me go back to page 1. Let me zoom in there, and I'm going to zoom in further so you guys can see this real closely. But I'm going to select this box right here, and I'm just going to click on that dot. I'm going to left click on it. Look what happens to my pointer. My pointer now becomes a picture, like a pitcher of water. And all I have to do is go to the document, the place in the document where I want to put this. I'm going to go to pages 2 and 3 here. And I want to go to that part right there, right? So I'm just going to click on it with my pitcher. You see it looks like a pitcher pouring water, boom, into it. If I zoom in now, there's the rest of that article. And so it had I let autoflow go at the top of that page 2 at the very beginning, it would have autoflowed into that part over there instead of over here. And so, like with this, I would modify this. I would make a title up here, and I'd make it a better title than that. But the heel story continued, and then what I would do. So now I have the story in place. Now what I need to do is tell people where this story came from, and that comes from formatting the text boxes involved in this document. Okay, so so what I'm going to go to page 1, and I'm also going to do something else while I'm on page 1. So I'm on page 1 here. Make sure doing well on time, great. And so as I look at this page on page 1, I kind of like having this big trough of white space over here that was there when I put this story in there. It filled in because of the length of this story. If I want to keep that big trough of white space right there, what I can do is just get rid of the text box that's currently holding that box right there. Now it's not going to lose my story. It's just going to push this chunk of the story to the next page. Let me show you how that works. So I'm going to select that box. I'm just going to right click it. I'm going to delete that object. Now the front page just has 2 boxes worth now. If I go back to page 3 where I put the rest of it, you'll see that it's now grown to where the rest of it is now back here. Cool. So that's kind of what I wanted to do. Now let me show you how to put the boxes to tell where to go look for the rest of the story, and also where it came from. So to do that, what you do, you right click the text box that you want to continue from, go to Format Text Box. Again, how I did that, I just selected that text box, I right clicked it, Format Text Box, and one of the tabs over the Format Text Box, one of the tabs available is Text Box, and you can check this box for Include on Page. So I'm going to include on page notification, hit OK, and what that tells the reader is that, hey, this story is continued on page 3. If I go to page 3 now, I can then take this box, select it, right click it, format that text box, go to the text box tab, and I can include a continued from notification. Hit OK on that. And so now it's continued from page 1. So now there's a very clear guidance for my reader. This heel story continued. It continued from page 1. If you go back to page 1, you'll see that a portion of it is there, and then there's a notification saying, hey, go to page 3 to read the rest of this. And so that's how you get stories from the text files into your publisher document. I'll do that one more time. I'm going to take this box right. I'm just going to totally delete that object because I like having that big white trough. And that's just me. If you don't like it, don't worry about it. I'm going to right click this. I'm going to select that box and of template text. I'm going to right click, change the text from a text file, and I'll reach out to story 1 from my folder. Hit OK. Publisher goes out to get it. It says, hey, do you want to autoflow? I'm going to say no because I want to be in command of that. And I see that this is a Game of Thrones story. And what I'm going to do is I'll put this one over here on page 2. I'll put that one, say, at the top of page 2 over here. So going back to page 1, I'll zoom in there, click the ... ellipse button right there. Now it looks like the picture. I can go back to wherever I want to in the document. I'll go to the top of page 2, and I'll select right there. And there's the rest of that story. So that one didn't spill over as much. It's not as long as an article as the first one was. And to get that to look good, I would actually do some more modification to that to come over here and push more of it back. I'd probably make the picture bigger or something. Maybe make it look like that. And in doing so, make it so that as I went to page 2 where it continued, where more of the story actually showed up right back in there. And also I'd put the continued from, continued to, and that was done through the right-clicking format text box. Go to the text box tab, and you put those notifications on there for your readers. So that's how you achieve this. Get them right-clicking format text box, and I want you guys to be really comfortable with that. That way you can make a good-looking, well-constructed document that your reader can then use well. So that's the first several steps of this project. We created the file, we named the file, we modified the masthead, we worked with the stories, we did continue to, continue from, we pulled from the outside data sources. So great. Next, what we're supposed to do, we're supposed to insert a pull quote. And a pull quote is some portion of the story that's somewhat provocative, very interesting, something that's going to grab someone's attention. And so what you do is you take that one little snippet of the story and you put it in a graphic, pretty graphic box, and you put it really big on the story. So if somebody's just perusing through the newsletter or the magazine, and then they see that box, they'll see that provocative statement and go, ooh, what's that about? And then they'll want to read the story. And so really easy to create these in Microsoft Publisher. In the templates themselves, most of the templates include boxes for pull quotes. Like here's one in the center of this one right here. If you were to zoom in right there, that's an example of pull quotes. So to catch the reader's attention, place an interesting sentence or quote from the story. And you'll note that it's right next to a box where the story would go. And so one of the common mistakes for students in this class to make is that they'll put a pull quote, they'll put a good pull quote on a page, but they won't put it next to the right story, which sounds sort of silly, but like if you had a really good pull quote you wanted to put for this story, I often have students that will put that pull quote over there because there's a pull quote object there instead of over here. Well, how do you get a pull quote object onto the page? Let me show you. We've got this story about Achilles heel injuries, right? And so let me select a sentence out of here, and then we'll put it into a pull quote. Okay, here's a sentence that I like. It's this doctor is talking about the recovery process for an Achilles heel injury, and he says the rehabilitation process is long and arduous. And so that's something I would like to put into a pull quote. Now I could just select it and copy and try and paste it into a pull quote. And there's actually a pull quote object right here. I'm not going to use that one. In fact, I'm going to take this pull quote and I'm going to delete it so I can show you how to get another one. But if I were to take this sentence and just copy it and paste it into the pull quote object, it essentially destroys the formatting that's in the pull quote object, which makes the pull quote look kind of cool. And so this is one of the things you need to type it. So select the pull quote that you want based on its look, and once that object is there, then you have to type in. I would recommend to you to type in the what you want the pull quote to say. And again, it's going to be short, but check your spelling and all that sort of good stuff. And like this has the word rehabilitation. I don't know about you guys, but I'm probably going to mess that up when I type it. But that's what I'd recommend to you as far as getting a pull quote onto the page. Where do the pull quotes come from? Well, we're going to go to the Insert tab of the ribbon up here, and there's this little drop-down box for page parts. And these are several different things that you can put onto a page, like sidebars and pull quotes and stuff like this. And you can scroll up and down and see all these different things that you could include in a newsletter. And you'll see that they are template specific, so these are going to look pretty in this template. If you wanted to put another story, hey, there's a box for it right there. And so you can easily pull these page parts out of this drop down box from Insert. What I want is a pull quote, and there's a pull quote area right up here, and I think this one's kind of pretty right here. And so I'm going to insert that pull quote. It puts it right there, and I'll just move it over to the side here so I can type it. And I'll pause it while I do the typing. Okay, so I have that typed in there, and you'll see that it's, my pull quote didn't fill up the whole box, and that's cool. I'm just actually going to make that smaller because what I'd like to do anyway is make this pull quote fit into this box with the story if that's possible. It's going to be a little challenging. I'm going to see if I can do it. But I'd like for this pull quote to kind of set in the middle of the story. And so to do that, all I have to do is select the box and then move it over here. And because of what's called text wrapping, the story wraps around what I'm doing here. Now you'll see when I did that, if I select this box, I now have the dot, dot, dot. And so my story is now not fitting into this box because I put this pull quote in there and it's too big. So what I can try and do here is try and make my pull quote smaller, and maybe I can get this thing to fit. And I would have to wrestle with that. Maybe I put it up here in the top or something like that. It's a struggle. The layout, again, your challenge as the editor is to come up with something that's pretty, but is going to include all the necessary information. So I would work with this, and I won't waste your time on that. You can select it, go to the bear with me 1 second. You can select that. I'm going to go to the font size and maybe make the font size a little bit smaller so it might fit a little better, and so on. But that's what you're trying to do as the editor is find a way to make all the different parts fit that you want and look nice. So that's a pull quote. That's how you get them onto the page, and that's mentioned right here in this instruction. Now, the next thing I would ask you to do is write some announcements, and you can do those in the sidebars. The sidebars of a newsletter document look like this. They're basically these things out here on the side. On the back page, the sidebars would look like something over here on the side maybe. On the front page, there was a sidebar over there and I deleted it. So this is a real good example, like these stories, these pictures and captions, that pull quote right there. And so you can use space like this to create announcements, again, about the organization itself, who the officers are, when there's going to be a recruiting event, how much the dues are, that sort of stuff. You just make that sort of thing up. So that's the announcement portion. This part right here is probably the most commonly missed item with my students, and that's where I like for you to write some part of this newsletter. And so I ask you to create a short personal passage that is inviting people to join this writing club or join this this club. And so where people go astray is where they make a really informal, almost like a text sort of message, and they don't spell check it, they don't grammar check it. It's terrible, it's awful. And so not everybody, but just the number of people that do that, it's just alarming. And so remember, you're in a 300 level college course, and so you need to write well. And so with this portion of it where you write your own message, make sure that that it makes sense, that the grammar is proper, that the spelling is correct, and that you're making sense. And one of the best ways to do that is to have somebody else read it after you've written it, somebody that will actually give you some good critical feedback. So that's the most commonly missed point deduction thing that I run into with this kind of project. Where would you put something like this? Well, in this sort of template, I'm going to put mine on my back page here. I'm going to I think this is a great spot right up in here. And if I were to zoom in here, what I would find is this is a box where I can put in this I could just use that text box and type. Actually, I would type it in Microsoft Word and pull it in through the same exact process that you guys saw a moment ago with the stories. That's how I would pull the information into this box here. But that's where I would put some sort of personal message. Hey, I'm the new editor. Thanks for reading. Please consider joining our organization. We do a lot of really cool stuff. Now, the next point in the instruction is for you to build a calendar. And so what I would do is I would tie these two things together. I would take this box right here and say, hey, please take a look at our calendar. You'll see that we have several events coming up in the month of January. And so down here is where I would put my calendar, and I would refer to it from up here, and that would make that sort of a cohesive page, because this is talking about what you're seeing down here. Now, how would we get the calendar in place? And to give you an idea, the calendar, you make some sort of calendar to support your personal message. And what's neat about the calendars in Publisher is that you can you pick calendars, and they pretty much will look good. They'll be in compliance with whatever your template you're using. They look nice. They'll color code and all that sort of stuff. And so it's real easy. I'm going to take this whole bottom half of this page and make it a calendar. And to do that, I just first have to get rid of this stuff right here. So I'm just going to select all of that business right there, and I'm just going to delete it. I'm going to hit the delete key. So now I have that bottom of the page free. Now I'm going to get rid of this little attention getter. I'm just going to at least move it out of my way. Those are kind of maddening. By the way, these attention getters, sometimes if you have like a message that's going to fit there and fit in there, okay, but you may find those very frustrating. And so if you find things like that that are frustrating, then just delete them and get rid of them. They're not worth the aggravation. So let me scroll back out to where I can see the bottom half of this page here, and let me insert this calendar that I want to insert. So I'm going to go to Insert, and you'll see next to Page Parts there's this whole drop down box for calendars. Now what I could do, if I want to do a calendar for the current month, I could select one of these items right here. You can see there's a drop down box. You can see like there's next month. So if it's this month or next month, then I would go with those. But if it's a month that's not this month or next month, then I need to go to More Calendars, and I then get to select when the calendar date is. So I'm going to go with, say, January of 2017, right? And then I get to choose the look of it, and I'll go with that one right there. That looks pretty. And I'll hit Insert, and it puts it on the page for me. And there you go. And I zoom out to where I can see the whole page. There's that nifty looking calendar, and that's what that is. That's really, it's just a table. Think of like the Visio calendars that we worked with back when we were working with Visio. And as you resize this thing, it will start to make things bigger inside of it. You can get in here into these individual cells of this table, and you can start to type text. You can take individual cells and put pictures in there. You can try and color code, but that's how you get a calendar into a Publisher document, through the Insert tab, Calendar. If it's this month, you can use what's immediately available right there for this month or next month. If it's something further out, you go to More Calendars and you specify what you're looking for. Okay, we're making good progress. Let's go ahead and finish up this tutorial. The next 2 points that we would want to work with have to do with things called styles. And if you've ever made websites before, you've ever worked with cascading style sheets, what we're doing is we're creating a new style that you would have in a style sheet. And so, this, again, it's exactly the same thing. We're making basically a new style just like you would in a cascading style sheet. In the document itself already, a lot of different styles exist. I'll give you an example. Let me come to page, I'll go to page 1 where I've got a couple of stories. I'm going to select this one, and on the Home tab of the ribbon, there's this drop down box for styles. And you'll see all these different styles are listed, and as I hover over the top of those, it shows me what they would look like. And you can see these styles in use throughout the document, but what a style is, it's a description of how you want text to look, and then when you need it, you just apply the style to whatever block of text you're working with. And so what I want you to know how to do is I want you to know how to create these styles for yourself, and I also want you to know how to import a style that exists in a document that you like. And so you can do both of those very easily. And so I'll click over here to just leave that block of text alone. But first thing I want to do is create my own style, and the style that I want to create is really it's real ugly. It's the CIS 321 right here, and it's going to have that font. It's going to have those effects with it. That's the size. I want to have a wavy underline with it, and I want the color to be green. It's very easy to spot. So when I go to Publisher, to get that to exist, I have to go to Styles. Again, I'm on the Home tab of the ribbon. I'm going to go to Styles. I'm going to go to New Style. And now I get to give it a name. So I'm going to call this CIS 320. And I'm going to go to Font. From there, I get to pick which font do I want. Well, I want Verdana as my font. So there's my font. I want the font size to be 16. I want the font color to be green. Let me see what else I wanted to do with this. I also want this to be bold and italicized, so I'm going to use a bold italic. And as far as an underline, I'll go to a wavy underline for it, right there. And you can see that's really easy to spot. So I'm going to hit OK and OK. And when I want to use that, like let's say I wanted to take this portion of this story right here, Jon Snow, make by Jon Snow, have that CIS 320 style. All I have to do is use the drop down box here, come down to the CIS 320, select it, and there it goes. It puts that onto the page for me. So that's how you create a style from scratch for yourself. Again, hit the style box, go to New Style, and then create it. Now, you may also want to import styles from existing documents. And I have a document that I want to import the style from. It's this Jim Lindsay style. And it has the stencil font. It's just, this looks like something you'd see like on a something talking about a boot camp or something like that. You know, it has this you know, what we might put on a duffel bag or something for an army. And so that's what that reminds me of. So this Jim Lindsay style exists in this Jim Lindsay style document. So to get that style into my new document, I could, you know, examine this and then try and duplicate it, you know, step by step like I did a minute ago from, you know, creating it from scratch. But what's easier is this. I'm just going to close that document, and in my Publisher document here, I'm going to go to Style, Import Style, and I'm going to go out to that Duluth folder where that's saved, select the Jim Lindsay style, import me, and OK. Now as you read this box, what it's asking you is saying like, hey, there's a normal style in the document you're importing from, and there's already a normal style in your document. Do you want to keep your current normal style, or do you want to go get, you know, do you want the imported normal style? I'd like to keep my current normal style, so I'm going to hit yes. And if you, as you read these instructions, you'll see what, you know, what I'm talking about. I'm going to hit yes because I'd like to keep this document's current normal style instead of getting the one that's in my in that other document. And so now I have the ability to, that Jim Lindsay style is now in this document. So to apply it, let me go to like TiWeb Golf Pro here. If we try to put that Jim Lindsay style in there, if we use the drop down box, as we come down here, there's Jim Lindsay, and put that on the page. And so there you go. There's the creation of a style, the CIS 320 style. There's the importing of the Jim Lindsay style right there. So that's covered in these two steps of the instructions here. Next, I would go out and get images that would match up with the stories, and the stories that you're going to get for my newsletter assignment are going to be really kind of strange. They're going to be like an eclectic collection of stuff from a whole bunch of different topics. Don't let that freak you out. Just, you know, go out and get some images that would be appropriate for whatever the story is. I would check the spelling and grammar. How would you do that in Publisher? Well, I just basically select a text box. I would go to Review, go to Spelling, and it's going to say, hey, do you know, it's check this current box. Do you want to check the rest of publication? Say yes, and let it go through, and then, you know, use the grammar and speller checker to identify stuff that's messed up. Now, name, you know, I'm not going to take you through that whole process, but you can use the spelling and grammar checker. I'm sure you know how to do that. You've learned how to do that in like CIS 141 or CS 145. But that is the spelling and grammar checker. as a spelling checker in Publisher. Now, again, I would also have someone look at it. Once you're done, I would have a buddy that will give you good feedback, take a look at it to tell you whether you are making mistakes or not, especially on your personal passage. Okay, to finish this up, if the publisher logo object is present, please get rid of it. I think I've mentioned that to you. I mentioned that to you with the flyer tutorial when I was teaching you about publisher flyers. It's not in this one. When I look at this particular publication, I don't see that logo object present. It's a little pyramid and it says like your logo underneath it. It looks just, it's ugly looking. So get rid of that if it's in your template. It's in some of them and it's not in all of them. And get rid of that table of contents. We've already talked about that. So those are the instructions. That's how I would attack this assignment. You know, how to create a newsletter for this organization, and how we've used the stories that were provided to us for this assignment. So hopefully this stuff has been helpful to you. Hopefully you're going to. I look forward to reading the documents that you guys assemble from the stuff that I give you. Oh, one last point on these pictures here. There are captions in the placeholders that you have for pictures. There are captions. Make sure that you actually modify the caption to match up with a picture if you're going to have the caption there. If you don't want any of that, you can just take that whole box and delete it. And then, so you can just take that whole object, get rid of it, and then like insert your own picture. You can go through insert pictures and then insert your own picture here if you want. You know, that's fine too. Let me go ahead and grab a picture here. Use this one right here. And so we have the anatomy of a unicorn here. Let's say that was part of the story. Then we would, you know, then put the picture there. And you know, there's not a caption with this one. And if you don't need a caption, like let's say it's, you know, let's say this was a story about, you know, how to butcher a unicorn, then I wouldn't need a caption. But if this is something that would benefit from having a caption, I then need to, you know, put a little text box next to it and say, here's a picture of a unicorn, and you know, the bacon comes from the belly, and this comes from the back, and blah blah blah. That's the value of a caption. So as you look at these template boxes that have images in there, almost all of them include a caption box, and that's just a text box that's been grouped with that image box that's on top, and you can work with those. If you just click on that, you can actually change the picture from within that interface right there, and it will keep the caption box locked to it. So you'll see that once you start working with the application. I look forward to seeing your work. If you have questions, contact me, and thank you for your time and attention.